Ask an Artist. My name is Veronica Ripple, and I manage the Public Art Division for the City of San Antonio. We are very happy that you joined us today. Our 2021 annual call is currently open, and in order to support this effort, we are here today to have a conversation with artists that have worked with the City of San Antonio. This session has been planned for all artists that want to apply to our open call or are thinking about it, and would like to know about first-hand experience of working on a public art project by someone that has already gone through this process, like the artists that are joining us today. The Public Art Division of the City of San Antonio has a lot of projects planned to start this year and next year too, so we need artists to work on them. We are hoping to have a lot more artists apply for this call from each district here in San Antonio, as well as other parts of Texas. And we will start the presentation, please. So next slide. Here is a picture of our team. We have the Director of the Department of Arts and Culture, Debbie Racaciter, the Public Arts Project Management team formed by Bianca Alvarez in the top, Kimberly Mireles, and Jordan Patrias. Myself, Veronica Ripple, the Public Art Division Manager. Our team is here to facilitate this conversation. So without further ado, please welcome our moderator for this session, Public Art Project Manager, Kimberly Mireles. Thank you.
Thanks, Veronica, and thanks everybody for being here tonight. Next slide. So this is really meant to be a discussion. I'm going to kind of lead the discussion for the first 20, 30 minutes, but we really want to hear from you and these artists tonight who are here to answer your questions. So please use the chat button in the bottom right of your screen. And when it comes up, make sure that you choose to send your message to everyone so that we can all see it. And you can start if you'd like by just putting in your name if you want to. So that you can introduce yourself. And please remember that this session is being recorded, and this is part of, we use our SAC guiding principles, so please be gracious and respectful in your comments. Next slide. So as Veronica mentioned, we're going to do a brief introduction of the public art program. We're going to introduce the artist, and then we'll escape this PowerPoint so you can see us a little bigger and have a good discussion about these public artists and how they came to be where they're at today. Next slide. So for those of you who aren't sure what public art is public art is art in a public place that has been through a public engagement process to determine where the art will be placed, who the artist will be, and what will be the inspiration or theme for the artwork. This public artwork and the artists are approved by our San Antonio Arts Commission. The projects are managed by a public art project manager like myself, Jordan, and Bianca, who are here tonight. And public art is paid for usually with public funds. Next slide. So here is a kind of simple version of our process. Each public art project that we do has a foundation and starts in community engagement. So it's really the community that tells us a few different things based on the project. From there, our public art committee approves a project location. After that, an artist is selected, and that artist develops a concept. Artists are selected by artist selection panels made up of community members and stakeholders. So once that artist is selected and approved, they use the community engagement to create a concept and then a final design, which we show to the community at various stages. And once we have an approved final design by our Arts Commission and our Public Art Committee, we go into fabrication and installation and finally have a dedication ceremony. Next slide. So I'm going to start introducing the artists, or rather introducing them so they can introduce themselves. So our first artist, and I'm going to ask each of our artists to speak about themselves and their background for 2 or 3 minutes. And then at the end of that, if you could tell us what was the first piece of art that you remember creating ever. So our first artist is Mari Hernandez. She is an emerging public artist. And she's on this panel because she is doing, and you can see a photo here, a part of our City Hall public art project with the renovations at City Hall, these beautiful Tapilam Nation portraits. This is just a rendering. This is not final design. We want to keep that a little, we want to have a surprise once it's shown. So Mari, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this discussion tonight, everybody at the City of San Antonio and everyone that's joined us here today. My name is Mari Hernandez. I am an artist. I work mainly within photography. I'm also an arts administrator and an educator. I have an extensive career working in the nonprofit art sector, which I started many years ago, which has really helped me come to where I am today in developing as both an administrator, as an artist. I work primarily with photography, and in my studio practice, I experiment with self-portraiture. But for the project that that I'm working on that I did for City Hall, I took portraits of other people. So in addition to my studio practice, I also am the education manager for Blue Star Contemporary. And that's a little bit about me. Oh, and the first piece of artwork that I remember creative is actually a self-portrait I did about 20 years ago, and it's actually behind me, the series. And those portraits have really kind of dictated my studio practice. So I continue to work in self-portraiture.
Great. Thanks for being with us tonight. So next slide. And our next artist, Leticia Huerta. She is a mid-career public artist. And we've been working with her. You can see pictured here is her project at McAllister Park, Bloom, which are these oversized flowers made up of bicycle parts. And you may have been seeing that we're doing a lot of community engagement for some new flowers that are going to bloom all over the city. So Leticia, why don't you tell us about yourself and then talk about your first piece of art you ever remember making. And go ahead and unmute yourself.
Right.
There we go.
Not too great with the computers, but so I'm a San Antonio artist. I mean, I say that, but I live outside of San Antonio now. I was raised in San Antonio. I went to St. Mary's University. I went to UTSA, SAC, you name it. So my roots are here, but I ended up in Dallas. I used to be a med tech, a medical technologist. I worked at the transplant hospital, which is what it is now, but I worked there for 10 years. And during that time, I was working towards my BFA at UTSA because I realized pretty quickly that that's not what I wanted to do. But my love of science and what we called back there ecology, back then, it just stayed in my work. And so in all this time, even though I left that science degree that I received at St. Mary's, it's still there, and primarily most of my work is about nature and my concern for, what's happening to nature. I don't really work as a studio artist very much anymore because the public art took over my life. And at one time I was juggling like 8 projects at a time, and I had to make a decision to do one or the other. So I do very little studio work, but when I do, it's mixed media, and it has to do with either my personal history or the environment. And so, yeah, I'm returning to that because I'm sort of stepping back from doing so much public art right now because of health issues mostly. And so I think that's going to return. But let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, the McAllister Park project, the Bloom series, was something sort of out of the ordinary for me because I've worked in transit projects a lot. I've worked at the Dallas Transit in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Houston, well, I can't remember, but anyway, in California. And so most of my work has been on surfaces, on the walls, on the floor, windscreens, because I was a painter. I was trained as a painter, but at UTSA, I did a lot of sculpture and ceramics, so I love all of the materials. I'm just really in love with working with all types of materials. And so that's why my own work is mixed media, and in each project, I look for that. I look for a new material, a new way of working. The first thing I can remember drawing was in a science class in junior high when we were told to keep a journal of what we were learning. And so I started drawing whatever we were learning, insects or whatever, and I just remembered loving that. And I really hadn't drawn before and had very little education in arts, but that inspired me, first of all, to be a scientist. And then later I realized it wasn't the science so much as the drawing that I loved. And so it was a combination of the two, but the art won out, But that's my first artwork. Yeah.
That's great. I really like that. Thanks for being with us tonight, Leticia. So our next artist that I'll introduce, so she can introduce herself, is Ashely Mireles. She's another emerging public artist and educator here in San Antonio, and you can see this work that we just finished working on at Phil Hardberger Park. It's a lovely wildlife viewing sign. So Ashely, why don't you tell us about yourself, and then if you remember the first artwork you ever created.
I do. Hi. Thank you. I'm Ashely Mireles. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the panel tonight. I'm really excited to be here. I am an artist in San Antonio. I've been living in San Antonio for about almost 20 years. And we are wrapping up the Hardberger Park Wildlife Lines project, which has been really fun for me. And as far as my practice goes, I do typically start out with drawings, and they'll be of anything, whether it's plant life to talk about like history or of people or pop culture and things today. And those drawings then usually become prints or murals in some cases. And I do also currently work as the education coordinator over at Art Cade San Antonio, which is an international residency program. And I mostly work with teens and university students and the community to engage them with some public art and contemporary art in San Antonio. The first art piece that I remember making was a really bad Picasso ripoff from, I think, fifth grade art class. And I just remember this one that stands out the most because my parents still have it hanging in their house.
That's funny because that is mine one. It's like in elementary school, it's doing a self-portrait Picasso style.
Exactly.
Next, and then thanks, Ashely. So our next artist also worked on the Phil Hardberger project, and like Leticia, has a background in science. So Cade Bradshaw, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks for having me on. I'm thrilled to join all of you. My name's Cade Bradshaw. I'm an artist, and I draw a lot of inspiration from my environment, from science. I'm very interested in the different natural systems, so how plants and animals interact, how those same creatures interact with the weather, their environment, drought. And through my work, I'm really interested in making close observations, and also the work leading people to maybe look a little closer or see something in a new way and really frame their attention so that they're recognizing what they're seeing and how they're seeing. And so that's a little bit about my work. I work in a lot of different mediums, and the first project I remember making was, I was obsessed with Indiana Jones when I was a child, and so I drew the cover on the VHS in a notebook, and
nice.
I'm sure my parents have it somewhere. Nothing gets thrown out. So
yeah, that's always nice, and I'm sure especially for artists to go back and see all the stuff their parents have. Well, that's great, Kate. Thanks for joining us. So next slide, please. What we'll do briefly before we get introduction or get to the discussion, just as a reminder, the reason that we wanted to host this tonight and have this discussion with these artists is to encourage people, encourage everybody here, and if you're listening to the recording of this, to apply for our pre-qualified list. That's really the first step in getting a public art project. So the application deadline to submit your application is January 18th, so that's next week. It's at 4:30, so let me talk about timeline first. So once you submit your application, the deadline is met. We're going to have scoring and review by our department, the Department of Arts and Culture. Once we get a list of people who we recommend, that will be reviewed and approved by the Public Art Committee in February, as well as going to the San Antonio Arts Commission for review and approval. From there, it will be reviewed, that list will be reviewed and put forth to City Council. So that'll happen this spring, and we'll email out results after that. Next slide. And if you have questions or have had any issues with the application, please contact Jordan Petrius, who you can probably see here tonight. Her email and address are on the screen. Her email and phone number, are on the screen. And we also have 2 previous kind of info sessions that we have recorded and are on our website at sanantonio.gov/art. Jordan goes through the whole application, the technical aspects, and fills out kind of a practice application. So you can follow along. And also GoSmart has plenty of tutorials as well. Next slide. So I'm going to, Stephanie, if you could exit out of the PowerPoint, and what we'll do now is begin talking. So the first question that I want to get us started with, and because we are here tonight for the pre-qualified list, what led each of you guys to decide to get you interested in applying to the pre-qualified list, and what motivated you to want to become kind of a public artist? So I'll start with Cade first.
Sure. I was working as the studio assistant of another artist in San Antonio. I was working for Stuart Allen, who has worked in the public art realm for a number of years. And so I was interested in public art because of its democracy and its engagement with people. And so I wanted to apply, and at the age I was, I knew that there was no chance of me receiving any project, which is good. But I applied for a number of years and didn't get in, and sort of tried to see it as a learning experience, and I eventually got in and got to make a first project. So that's my story.
And that's a good kind of message is, we have a lot of questions from people who are like, well, I just graduated high school, or I don't have any experience, and that goes to show you, like, just apply every year. You know, we review every application, and if you don't get it another year, you know, apply the next year and work on your portfolio. So, as Kate said, you know, it can be a long process, and just keep on applying. And so, Ashely, why don't you talk about what motivated you to kind of apply to be on the pre-qualified list, and what your experience applying for that first time was like?
Okay. So I applied because I really wanted to make art for anybody to enjoy that's outside and accessible. But I knew that it wouldn't be, well, at least I thought that it wouldn't be, I didn't know what to think going into it, not having any experience with making public art. And so at the very least, I knew that I wanted to apply so that it wasn't practice for applying to programs, but also just so that the city could see my name, you know, like every time that I'm trying and I'm consistent. And so every year that I would be able to, I would apply and then be in that pre-qualified list. And so that was my idea for starting something that I really wasn't sure of what to expect. You know, at the very least, I really just wanted to put my name in there.
That's good advice. And Leticia, how about you? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
I'm so old. I've been in public art for so long that I don't remember when I first applied for the San Antonio registry or whatever it's called, but I know it was a while back. I mean, it was way back. I know that it started up maybe just in the old-fashioned sense with the slides and all that. I don't even remember. So I just kept applying because, you know, I was in Dallas, and I had done some projects out there with the DART, you know, which is like VIA here. And so that was my first introduction into public art, and I worked on 3 stations at the same time. So it was like I was just thrown in the fire, and I was just out of school, and it was just kind of dumb luck that I happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I was so broke, I said, yes, I'll do it, but I had no idea what I was doing. And so by the time I came back home to San Antonio, I had some experience, but back then I think we were just applying for individual projects. Like a project would come up and you'd apply. And so, you know, I don't remember, but I just know that I kept applying, you know, over the years because I felt that it was like the best place to apply. I mean, and I've worked with a lot of different systems with the transit systems, which is very difficult sometimes because they're so huge and they're, you know, I guess their priorities have, you know, are all over the place. And I've always found that working through a city public art organization is the easiest because you guys understand us. You know, you're just here for us, for the artist, and for the project, right? And so I applied here, I apply in Austin, I apply in Fort Worth, I apply in Dallas because, you know, they're all in the same realm. They're all, you know, they're all great, right? I even apply in other states, although I don't think I'm going to be working, you know, traveling right now. But it was sort of like when you're sending your work out to galleries or for shows, the more you have it out there, the more chance you have of getting a project. I mean, I was getting projects right out of leaving Dallas and just having those 3 projects behind me. And It's just like a numbers game. You just have to keep applying, and eventually, they'll see your persistence, and they'll get to look at your work year after year and see your growth. And, that's why I think, one should keep applying and not give up.
And
if you're really interested.
Yeah, that's a great point, too, is, we work for the city of San Antonio, so of course we want you to apply for ours, but please, most cities have a public art program or a pre-qualified list, so you can always kind of spread your wings that way. So thanks, Leticia. And then Madi, did you have a similar kind of experience where there was, a few applications before you got on the list?
Yes, absolutely. I think I've always been a fan of public art, and really my introduction to art was public art and the work that I did for a local nonprofit organization. So I knew that I always wanted to transition into that some way and see photographs on a large scale within the public landscape somehow. And I also think, that the process of public art and kind of, transitioning from a studio practice into this different type of presentation, I was interested in the challenge of it. And so that was one of the reasons why I applied, even though I didn't think that I would be accepted into the call. So again, like many other of the artists said, it was, I knew that I needed to apply and throw my name into the hat and keep on applying and be okay with rejection. It was great to actually be able to get that project.
And Madi, you're a great example, I think, of, your main work is photography. And right. Some people think, oh, well, I'm just a painter or a photographer. How can I be a public artist? And, the piece that you're doing for City Hall kind of is almost like it's not a great outdoor public sculpture, but, it's still a public art piece that's inside that people are going to see. So that's, we get that question a lot, but I'm not a sculptor. I'm not, I don't work on a huge scale, and that's perfectly fine. So, and you started talking about this, but when you got word that you got the City Hall project, can you talk about kind of what were your feelings? Did you panic and think, how am I going to pull this off? Or you, what were just your thoughts and how, I guess, you approached it, saying like, okay, now what?
Yeah, all of those things. Definitely panicked, and in addition to all kinds of other feelings. But I remember the day that I got the email, and I was in shock. And I think my reply back to, I remember who sent it, was like, yay, yes. And then I pressed send without kind of answering all of the questions because I was so excited about it. And yeah, it was definitely a great moment. That I'm very thankful for. Yeah. And, going back to what you were saying about, being a photographer or, working with within a medium and really not being unsure of how to transition into public art. It's, I think I should have talked a little bit more about the sample images that you showed earlier, but that was like the fourth or fifth kind of rendering and conceptualization of that project. So, with the help of yourself and with people around me, I was able to continue to push my ideas and push these boundaries of photography to get to the point where I am today.
Yeah. When we'll be releasing a video of the City Hall projects, and Madi's is very, very cool, and maybe we can talk more about it in a little bit. But I think something that you mentioned that I want to kind of pick up with Kade and Ashely is, and you guys know better than me, but when you get a project, some people are like, well, I have no idea what the next steps are. And Madi mentioned that she sought, advice of other public artists or or different things. And for Cade and Ashely's project at Hardburger Park, we worked with an engineer and a landscape architect. So if you guys could talk about how you kind of translated your studio or that into this structure that had to be engineered and meet, building code and different things, and how you manage that.
Ashely, you first or me?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. I really welcome that type of a collaboration. I like the play between exploring materials and thinking, okay, maybe it should be made out of steel, or maybe it should be made out of wood, and then sort of letting some of those constraints start to guide where the project goes. So, a project that is going to be outdoors in the hot sun, that needs to withstand a lot of abuse from the weather and from people being around it, that sometimes needs a certain type of treatment. And I really relish that. And working with the architects and engineers was really informative. I learned a ton about materials and the complexity of engineering drawings and the types of considerations that were being put onto the art. So I thought it pushed things in a new direction. How did you think, Ashely?
Well, I think at the beginning I was really unsure about how my work would translate into something that would be 3D. And I remember that I went into our first meeting as a group, as a team, that my first idea was a hand-cut collage of flowers that I quickly drew, and had gotten the sample kind of outline of the structure that was just the staples, and then I just applied all of these hand-cut paper flowers to it, and was like, this is what I want to do. And I was like, this would be my dream house, basically. But that I had to figure out how to really actually translate that into something that was real. And so, I think working as a group and having, especially Cade, to talk to as an artist, and then having our architect and engineer, mostly Greg, our architect that worked with us, and Kimberly. I don't think I could have done it without you, at all. It's been most helpful to have a guide, because I didn't know what to do or what the extent of my capabilities could be, or and just feeling comfortable. But having our group that we worked with has been great, to hear from everybody and hear everyone's points and their own experiences, and I don't know, that was probably the best part, I think, having that collaboration. And it wasn't really just our core team, but also having those moments where we would meet with community members that had some concerns, basically, with the design that's going into an area that they support. So meeting with them and hearing concerns that whether it's from safety or how something functions, was really beneficial too.
And it was kind of fun for us, particularly because we were working on the same form and just applying sort of different treatments to the envelope. So it was really rewarding for me to have this back and forth with, so Ashely's approaching this, maybe I should think in this direction. And
right.
so it was
good. I think
My first really good feeling, I think other than our first initial meeting and feeling that Kimberly knows what she's talking about, was also Kate, that you and I had met up at Hardburger Park to walk around and look at everything and kind of talk about what our initial thoughts are and what our top goals were as far as if you think about material, what do you think about? And we were both really wanting to work with Corten steel, and so just having that conversation and those times that we were able to meet all together were really helpful.
Agreed.
And for Hardburger Park, we had the landscape architect that we worked with is the architect that was already chosen and who had kind of been with Hardburger Park since it started. But Leticia, I know for Bloom, your project, you really had to source a fabricator and, an engineer to work with. So can you talk about how you kind of maybe, your contract was to do everything, to find everything. So can you talk about kind of what steps that you took to find that fabricator, or did you know them already, and then kind of how you worked with the fabricator and installer who was the same company?
Yeah, well, I got the name of the fabricator because I didn't have a fabricator that I had worked with here in San Antonio. So they were on the list, on the pre-approved list that you guys have for fabricators. That's where I found them. And I talked to them and another fabricator in town, and I just felt like Wonderlust was the best fit. And I had an engineer that I had worked with up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area on another project, or a couple of other projects up there. And so I felt comfortable with that engineer, so I hired her again to work on this with me. The Draftsman, well, actually with Bloom, I went through a long process of trying to find a Draftsman, and I used several, and then in the end, Wonderlust had someone they had worked with, and he's just really, really wonderful. I mean, he's so busy that I have to stay on him and keep bugging him, like, where are my drawings? Where are my drawings? But in the end, it's always, really nice. And it's different from, I prefer, and I'm not sure if it's the same process that Ashely and Cade went through, but of course it's so much nicer when the engineer and the architect is already there and they've already, engineered part of the structure, because then you don't have to worry about that. It is always a little bit more difficult to have to hire your own fabricator unless you already have a relationship with someone. So for me, it was a scramble because I had just moved. Well, I hadn't just moved, but it was like my first major project here in San Antonio. And so I just didn't have all of those things in place. But once it started, we started working together, it kind of, fell together, but it's not an easy task. I mean, you need more time, I guess, to find the person you can work with well. And I think that had I tried to do this maybe 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I think that the experience that I've gained over time brought me to this place where, because I'm not a sculptor, like some of the other artists are saying, I'm not a sculptor, I was a painter, although I love materials, I don't have that sort of mind where I can think about how to engineer something. And so I really feel that it just took some time for me to get to that point where I could do this all on my own. Looking back, I think if I had had an engineering degree plus a sculptor's, you know, that would have been the perfect to do the work that I'm doing for Bloom, you know. But in all the other work I've done, it really has just been on the surfaces. A lot of it, like all the transit projects, have been sort of like that, where the architecture was there, and they would give us a surface to work on. And so that, to me, felt more comfortable, although, you know, working for such a huge entity was sometimes, you know, it was so massive. But the nice thing was that they would set up the community engagement sessions, and that was always so much fun. I mean, I remember people yelling and fighting and screaming, and we were doing the DART projects in Dallas, and I was scared, really, but then later I think, you know, they were so excited about something going up in their neighborhood that they made the time to come out and voice their opinions, you know, and to me that's really exciting. But I'm going on a tangent, but yes, it was difficult.
Yeah, I think,
but it's doable. It's
yeah,
doable.
And that's the thing is, yeah, none of these projects happen in a bubble, whether it be, you know, the project managers, you know, we're all trying to get the same thing, and we have experience, and, you know, I know, Madi, you talked to, you know, other public artists during your creation, because we had discussions about how, like, material-wise, and especially with something like your work, how it can last for the 30 years that public art needs to last. So I guess, can you talk about what kind of advice you would have for kind of somebody either getting that kind of experience that you got with this project outside of, you know, without getting a commission, or what kind of professional development would benefit, or networking would benefit somebody who wants to be a public artist?
I think that just getting to know, like, some of the people in town that work with steel, that work with cast stone, and powder coating, and all of those different types of materials that go into a public art project. It's always fun to go and take a tour of their facilities, and just to start a relationship. But, you know, what I forgot to say, and is really important, is that the way you have this set up, you have all of these pre-approved artisans and fabricators that is also a huge help when you're starting to think of how to build something. Because when I started to think about what I was going to do with Bloom, Simon and I'm blanking on her name. Oh my gosh.
Autumn.
Autumn. God. They were just fabulous. I mean, in talking to me about how they could build it, you know. I mean, I just had these sketches, these crazy sketches, and they were just really out there. And they would tell me, well, we can do it with this and that, and so it's working like that, you know, working with the fabricator and trying to figure out how you're going to do something. I don't want anybody to think that because I've been in public art for 30 years that it's going to take that long to be able to do something like that. That's not true. That's just me, because I don't have a sculptor's experience. I don't have that sort of experience. My work has always been on the surface. So this is like a brand new experience for me.
Yeah.
Someone
and
that is
Leticia,
something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're talking about our support services list. So this will just be a small plug too, that, you know, we do have art support services, people who can apply for the pre-qualified list as well. So you can apply as both an artist and a support service provider if you do have that sculpture knowledge or project management or anything. So that's a great option. But Madi, I wanted to ask you kind of the same question about maybe what kind of professional development do you recommend for people who are just starting out, and what kind of experience that you found most beneficial in your project?
Sure. Well, I want to mention that this is my first ever public art project, and it was first time ever. So if you're out there and you're thinking that I've never done anything like this before, please don't let that hold you back from applying for these open calls. There are first about reaching out to your community. Because you mentioned this before, Kimberly, when I first started the work, I did reach out to a few people that I know were public artists and that were also photographers, and asked them certain questions about their processes. In addition to that, but what I made the mistake of doing was just doing that at the beginning of the process, and we started this project a long time ago, and I really should have stuck with that. And I think that looking back in retrospect, I should have relied on my community a lot more for support and encouragement and to ask questions, because I feel like that would have relieved a lot of stress, because there are certainly a lot of people out there that are willing to give and help you out with these types of things. I was a participant in the inaugural Public Art San Antonio mentoring course, which I know is on hold right now. But that course really kind of opened things up for me, and I gained a better understanding of the process that is public art, because it is very different from in my opinion, from being a studio artist. So I was kind of able to wrap my head around the process of making it and all of the different steps. And so that was a big help for me. And also I've worked within organizations, and I work within an organization right now that creates public art. And so being close to that and understanding, again, the processes and all of the things that have to take place in the background have really helped me a lot. So there's a lot of things that I've done in order to get here today. And still there's, much more to learn. This first public art project for myself was a huge learning experience. But yeah, there was a lot of things that have helped me get here.
And I think we had somebody write in, I'll read the question. What are the chances of being selected? If I haven't done any public art projects yet, I have various relevant experiences, but I'm not currently a working artist. Are my chances really slim? And I think you answered that in what you just said, where, Madi and Cade and Ashely, these are y'all's kind of first solo projects. So we work and encourage emerging artists and try to help with that. But like Madi and Ashely are both work at arts organizations, and I think all experience is relevant, whether professionally or artistically. Okay, we had a question that I'll ask. Cade and Ashely, or one of y'all has this. We had somebody ask, I've seen a lot of video promotion for various public works. How much input does the artist have in that? Is that solely a city managed item? As a public artist, how do you address or feel about the videos? So that question is talking about what we've been calling dedication videos for the project. Usually for projects, we have a dedication ceremony. There's kind of a ribbon cutting and an in-person gathering. Obviously, during COVID, we can't have those due to restrictions. So these videos were kind of our way of dedicating and opening the art project. So Cade and Ashely, I know, I guess, how do you guys feel about the video? And I know Ashely had her model moment when we were making the video.
So I'll start. I appreciate the video. If there's some way to document that and kind of celebrate this time in some way, I appreciate that very much. So I feel very good about it. But as far as like how much input we might have, I know, at least with my experience working on that video, was like I could give as much input as I wanted to, or say that I was uncomfortable with something, or like, I didn't want to do something, or this is really important to me. And so those types of things, I feel like that was a good thing. And I felt like I had as much input as I wanted to on it. I think that the turnout of it as well was really beautiful too. Like to see the work that was done and put into it and it come together was really nice to see. I don't know if I answered all the questions.
Yep.
Okay.
And Kade, I'm actually going to ask you a different question that we got in here.
Sure.
Says, I've noticed that the city has been getting pairs of artists to collaborate. I see how this can benefit the city as they get multiple artists for projects, but what are some of the greater benefits to the artists involved? So you and Ashely kind of worked as a team on Harburger Park, even though you had separate structures. Can you talk about what benefits you found from being in that partnership with another artist?
Definitely. I think that the greatest benefit for me is to sort of leave your own echo chamber. When we were conceptualizing the project, Ashely, we talked about a lot of ideas, a lot of different ideas. And sort of that first phase for me is always sort of like try to propose as many dumb ideas as possible, right? And they're not dumb, you just don't know if you can do them yet. And that's totally fine. And that's how the process should evolve. And I found that having another person to sort of bounce that idea off of, have them volley it back, say, what if you did that instead? And that sort of a dialogue is really fruitful for the way I work. Working on a project alone can be rewarding in its own right. But I have a tendency to feel stifled sometimes by my own internal critic or whatever. So.
Thanks. And Madi, we have a question that I think is good for you, or is what types of key features? How do you incorporate and engage the community in your artwork? So, do you want to talk about kind of your project and how you worked with the community?
Yes. So, I think one of the most important things in creating a piece of public art is the community feedback that you get. And so my project for City Hall are a series of portraits called the Tapilab Nation Portraits. And they're photos of lineal descendants of the San Antonio missions. And so I worked with the American AIT, with the American Indians of Texas at the Spanish colonial missions, to connect with their community and to find individuals who were interested in having their portrait taken and being a part of this project. And so something that was really important for me was to make sure that whoever I was working with or whoever I was photographing had control over how they were going to be represented within the photograph, because I'm a photographer, and knowing the relationship and the history between photography and Native and Indigenous communities, I wanted to make sure that I didn't perpetuate stereotypes or things like that. So I wanted to be very careful about how I approach this project. So with the help of AIT and with community members, I was really able to complete the project. And I kind of see it what it is. It's a collaboration. I don't see it as entirely my own. I see it as something that belongs to everybody, really. And I think that's what I like about public art, is that once it's done, there's a moment where I feel like I've released it, and it's not mine anymore. It belongs to someone and something much bigger than me. So yeah, I think that working and getting community feedback and guidance and approval is a really important step. And so yeah.
Thanks. And Leticia, for Bloom as well, can you talk about kind of the community engagement meetings that Bianca's been doing to kind of, and what they've been telling us? And then just unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yes, well, you know, most of these meetings have been online like this. So it's a little bit weird for me because I can't see the community members. And so it hasn't been, I guess the experience hasn't been the same as it has been in the past. But it's still very helpful, you know, to see the comments afterwards, because that's what happens is I'll get the comments afterwards. And then you guys do community meetings beforehand, and I get to see the results of that as well. But in the past, I guess when things go back to normal, I've always found the community engagement so important. I mean, how can you do a project without it? You have to know what that community is about, what they're interested in. You know, I remember the very first Bloom and McAllister, we didn't have a big turnout when we organized a community engagement meeting, but it was so helpful because we took a walk through the trails, and it was during that and hearing what was said that, you know, just kind of got your ideas going. I didn't have an idea before that. I mean, you know, it's like I looked out there with something I had never done before, and I felt like I was just out there blowing in the wind because I'd always had a backing, a structure to work on, and I didn't have it this time. And so it was at that community meeting where I started thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. It has to be about the flowers. And as I was working on that, I had to redo it so many times because it wasn't quite right. But in the end, it was still about the flowers, you know. And so it's just like, I think the most important step in the process is at the beginning when you do the community engagement, and you continue that throughout.
Yeah, and that's just a little plug if you're listening and want to get more involved. Please, you know, follow us on social media. We are always announcing when we have community engagement events and surveys and different things. So that's, please, you know, you guys drive this. The community drives every project. So they're really the foundation. And Ashely, I was going to ask you, or if anybody else has a comment. We have a question that says, are artists able to make a comfortable living off of public art, or do you have to juggle a day job with this program? If you were able to leave a day job, how scary or easy was it to face paying your bills as an artist?
Well, okay. So I always say that being an artist is like having two jobs. Number one, you're an artist, and number two, you have another job to supplement your income as an artist. If I were to leave my full-time job, it would be really scary. So I don't think that public artwork is something that we can count on, you know, like us as individual artists. And it would be pretty fair for it to be for any organization like San Antonio or any group to select, you know, as many artists as possible. And so not all artists are getting the same, or not one artist is getting more jobs than another person. So I don't think that would happen. For right now, I wouldn't be comfortable with that idea. So I think that answers that for me.
I think that's a good point too, is, you know, we try to diversify and, you know, there's so many great artists in San Antonio that have unique voices and visions, and we want to really work with as many different artists as we can. But, you know, I think Madi and Ashely, you guys have day jobs. And Cade's day job is, working with another artist. So I think, those three, they're still, as Ashely said, it's two jobs.
What do you think, Leticia?
And yeah, Leticia is the full-time artist here. Go ahead. There you go.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Well, there was a time where I was making enough money to not do anything else, and I did that for, I would say, maybe 5 to 7 years. But it was still pretty scary. And I had my husband who had the full-time job. And the big thing was he had the benefits. He wasn't like making a ton of money, but he had the benefits. And we have kids, so, you have to think about that when you're deciding whether to do that. I think that if you want to make public art your work, your main work, that's what you want to do. And then I did make that decision. You have to, I was applying everywhere. Like I said, at one point I counted up my projects because I was going crazy, and I thought, oh my God, I can't remember if I was running like 7 or 8 jobs at one time, and it was insane, and it's too much. But I know that there are artists. There are plenty of artists that have their studio. They have a huge studio. They have assistants. They have their in-house engineer even that have been able to make a fabulous living doing public art. But I think it takes a huge commitment, and as I said, I think that it takes a certain amount of planning at the very beginning to be able to do that. That has to be a very conscious sort of decision, and it has to be put together a certain way. You can't do it by yourself. You have to have assistance. You have to have, I think the financial backing to set up a studio of that type to be able to live as a public artist, and that's, where all your income comes from. I was never able to do it. I probably could have supported myself without my husband for about 5 or 7 years. But, before that I was teaching, I was doing other things to support myself and my kids. So I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah.
And
it's something.
The other thing is that you can't ever rely on an income that comes regularly, because it's tied to the schedule and how much you've done. And so I never wanted to rely on the public art money to pay my bills, like the bills that would like rent. So yeah, it would be very, very difficult. That's it.
That's good advice. Have a question here, and we're getting close to the end, so I'm going to kind of paraphrase this question. Once you're on the list, can you increase your chances of being asked to submit a proposal? So I think as Cade and Ashely and Leticia and Mari all said, they were applied several times, and once you are approved to be on the pre-qualified list, you're on for 3 years. So, we look at the artist selection panel, artist selection shortlist based on what the community has said. So if they say they want a sculpture or somebody who does nature artwork, then, make sure that your portfolio shows everything that you can do and shows, different facets if you work in multiple mediums or different things. Just make sure, I would say that your application reflects all of your skills or interests that you have. I don't know if anybody else wants to add on to that.
I sort of do. When I apply somewhere, I'm very conscious of kind of what is the common thread that's tying together the projects that I'm submitting for this application. And having been on only a handful of like selection panels, the applications that stick out to me, there's like a clarity of theme or a clarity of idea that someone like Kimberly could say, this artist makes X type of work. And then you can kind of put it in this place more easily rather than trying to, if it's too variable, it's hard to pin down sometimes. I don't know if you agree, but that's something I try to do when I put together an application set or a list of images.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Is the artist selection panel is made up of people people who know art, but also community members who may have no background in art. So I think, when you're looking at your art or your application, kind of keep that in mind as well. We have a question that says, please explain the funding process. I'll take that one. We are funded through bond funds. So all of our public art projects are tied to bond projects. And at the beginning of each bond cycle, we do citywide community engagement, where the city community tells us which projects should get public art. So, for example, Hardburger Park was selected as something where public art could go. So that's where the funding goes. And the artist does get a design fee for each project. But there's also that budget covers fabrication and installation and everything as well. So we have a question, and I think this will be, I'm going to answer this question real quick and then kind of do a closing question here. Question about how our teams form for public art projects and how they might get together. So not all of our public art projects are team projects. It's kind of case-by-case basis, but there's not usually, so I'm just going to say it's dependent on the project. If there's a lead artist or, in Cade and Ashely's case, they were kind of independent but working on the same project, and their designs had to talk to each other. Okay, so I wanted to end with asking you guys, and this will be the last question, if we didn't get a question answered, please email Jordan, and her email is in the chat, but it's also on our website if you have technical questions about the application, or, please watch the videos for the info sessions that we've done. But I wanted to kind of end with kind of just any advice that you would give to people just starting out, or, who want to be a public art project or public artist but haven't gotten that first step. Or any closing things that you might want to, words of encouragement you might want to shout out.
Okay, I'll say something. And I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. In retrospect, I think I would have asked for guidance a little bit more. I think that you can really, as Ashely said earlier, thank goodness for you and your flexibility and your patience and your very even mood, because you were able to really kind of help me out along the way and help me feel confident about what I was doing. But we have an the artist community here in San Antonio is huge, and it's so gracious and giving. So I would definitely recommend seeking out other public artists. If they're working in the same medium as you, even better, and ask them questions. And no question is a dumb question. And, pretty much during this entire process, I was questioning whether I could do this or not. And really felt like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I really did. And I think that trusting your own artistic process is really important, but also asking for help when you need it, and make sure that there's people around you that you can go to and ask questions and ask for support, even if it's just someone to like cheer you on and be like, yes, you can do this. There's a reason why you were chosen. And to build that confidence, I think that goes a long way.
I would also say that that's probably a great idea. I know that, like, I relied definitely on Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly. But as far as someone who's like an artist who is just hasn't ever applied to this open call and they're just not sure if they want to do it. I know I did it just because I wanted to try to put my name on a list, and I wasn't really, I know that I wanted to help make public artwork, but I didn't think that was ever going to be possible. So when I first got the initial email that was telling me that I'd been selected, I almost didn't even respond to it because I was like, I don't know really if that's something that I want to do. And I just went ahead and did it because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so I would say, like, just do it, just do it because you want to do it. If you have any interest in it, you should probably do it, because you might regret it and then you don't get another chance to apply until next year. And as far as like submitting images for your application, I would say like submit images of work that you enjoy making, because that's what you're going to be doing for years if selected. And apply every year if there's new artwork or something that you're proud of that you want to share that wasn't on your application before. And I think ask a lot of questions. Even now, like if you have questions before before the application is done and your name's on the list of the pre-qualified artists or the support services, like just ask questions. Like you guys are all really accessible, I think, and are all very supportive and helpful. And so as far as like your application process goes, I think the best thing to do is just reach out to people, and just submit images of work that you like and just keep doing it. You never know.
Don't give up. Keep applying. Do it.
And just, the same thing. Just keep applying and don't panic when you do get the project, because you guys at PASA are just, everybody I've worked with has been so helpful and so wonderful that, in the applying process and beyond, it's just, you just have to use the resources and ask questions, and it'll be great. And even though it might be a painful process the first time, it's a learning experience, and it just gets better with every project.
Well, that's great to hear you guys say that, and I think we're running over, so I'm gonna call it an end. But I just want to thank Cade and Madi and Leticia and Ashely for coming tonight and kind of imparting your wisdom and your encouragement. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and encourage some of our other public artists. And if you, as I mentioned, the deadline to apply is January 18th. Please visit our website. We have lots of guides and FAQs and different things. And as always, please reach out to us if you have any questions about the qualified list or our projects or our process. We'll be happy to help out. But with that, we'll say good night and good luck applying on the call. And thanks again, guys, for joining us. Good night, everyone.
Night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.